Welcome back to Break the Business. Ryan Corelli here with Elisa Rockdock. Very, very exciting. Thank you all for checking us out on all the major streaming platforms, all the podcasting platforms, and on SiriusXM 145. Look, there's a lot of places to find us. Wherever you have found us, we are just so glad that you have. Good to see you again, Elisa. It's been entirely too long.
Absolutely. I'm really, really glad I could do this with you again.
Yeah, this is going to be a blast. I'm excited for this one. Joining us on the program this week is the U.S. Representative for North Carolina's 2nd Congressional District. She is the sponsor of the Protect Working Musicians Act of 2023, which is legislation that would give independent musicians the ability to collectively negotiate with music streaming platforms and generative AI platforms for fairer compensation. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting ross.house.gov. We are happy to welcome Congresswoman Deborah Ross on to Break the Business. Hello, Congresswoman.
Hello, great to be with you.
We are thrilled to have you, although we have to say, I feel like you got a lot of other things that are going on right now, and it's a very busy time. I'm thrilled that you made time for us. With that, y'all don't have a speaker right now. It's very, very busy.
Well, they decided to go home about an hour and a half ago, so I might have had to cancel on you if we had more votes, but things were not going in the right direction for the Republicans. So the Democrats have said, we're happy to work with you, but in the meantime, I'm on your show.
Well, we want to break this logjam. If I could make a humble suggestion here, I've read my Constitution, and I know it says that you don't actually have to be a sitting member of Congress to be Speaker of the House. So I'm thinking, so you're pointing at me. I was going to say that we should have Elisa be Speaker of the House.
Absolutely not.
I mean, are you kidding? People want to see that fire engine red hair and those tattoos on C-SPAN. And she's so good at gaveling, Congresswoman. You have no idea.
There is that gavel.
Yeah,
it's very tempting.
Yeah. Well, we'll take it under advisement.
There you go. That doesn't sound good, Elisa.
Nope.
I know what that means. All right. Let's talk about the Protect Working Musicians Act. This is a piece of legislation that we've been excited about at Break the Business even before you took the oath and became a member of Congress. We had Congressman Ted Deutsch on the show last year to talk about this piece of legislation. We've always kind of been following it and wanting to see if it moves forward. And I'm curious, what got you interested in this area of public policy? What made you want to take up the mantle for working musicians?
Well, I have worked for artists' rights for decades as an attorney, and I even studied artists' rights as a law student, and really want to make sure that people who put their heart and soul and creativity into making our world better and entertaining us get compensated for their talents. And so this is something that I've had a long interest in. I serve on the intellectual property subcommittee of Judiciary because I care about copyrights and patents and making sure that people who invent and create get rewarded for what they do. And then when Representative Deutsch decided to retire, I was recruited by a lot of the working musicians in my district. I represent Raleigh and Wake County, North Carolina. We have a lot of musicians there, and they wanted me to work on it. And then, of course, I care about this new piece, this AI piece that has now emerged and that Congress has been doing a lot of work on.
Help me understand a piece of this legislation that I think a lot of musicians are probably having trouble with as well. So, Elisa is a working musician. She's got her music on Spotify and all the streaming platforms. If this bill says that musicians would be allowed to get together with other musicians and collectively tell Spotify, if you want all of our music, you need to pay us better rates. Why can't musicians do that today? What stops musicians from grouping together and negotiating against Spotify?
So the thing that stops musicians from doing that are antitrust laws. So we have these laws that say that certain kinds of businesses can't come together and control pricing. Now, it doesn't usually affect musicians or creative people. It's usually basically, so let's just say airlines can't all
Yeah,
decide how
banks,
much it
airlines,
costs.
oil companies.
Right.
Video
right.
game companies.
Yeah, how much it's going to cost for a ticket to New York, right? Because you want to be able to have that competition to get the lowest price for the consumer. But when it comes to musicians, it's actually more kind of like a class action lawsuit, where just say something, there was a bad medical device or something like that, a single person wouldn't have very much negotiating power in order to get their compensation. And so what this allows is multiple people to come together and negotiate together. So while it's really a way around antitrust law, I see it a lot like a class action lawsuit where people who might not be able to afford to assert their rights can band together and assert their rights together.
Different versions of this legislation have been circulating in prior Congresses. And for the most part, this bill hasn't made a lot of progress. But I feel like the winds are different now, right? With the SAG-AFTRA strikes, I think people are more mindful than ever of the difficult times that creative professionals are going through, and how hard it can be for people in Elisa's line of work to maintain a good standard of living. Do you see those labor movements as possibly being a catalyst for having this version of this law move forward through the halls of Congress?
I do see the interest in artists' rights and labor rights being a reason why the public at large would be more interested in this. I also think that the pandemic made this a bigger issue because a lot of artists didn't see any reason to really fight it if they could go on tour, right? If they could get money from concerts. But during the pandemic, people became a lot more reliant on what they could sell to streaming services, what would get picked up. And they didn't have the income that they got from doing live shows. That's what I heard from artists. And then I think the third thing that people are aware of is this new piece that has to do with AI and how AI has been using people's copyrighted work in ways that then make that AI, whoever owns the AI, money. And you're really not supposed to do that with a copyright unless you get permission and a license and pay that person. And so that issue has come up quite a lot on the intellectual property subcommittee. And so I think that those three things have come together to make artists more aware of their rights and to make the public and legislators more aware of their rights.
And that piece about AI that you were talking about, I think makes your metaphor about this legislation kind of being like class action lawsuits more apt, because these AI platforms could be stealing artists' work. And so this legislation could be a mechanism to allow artists to fight for their rights and get better treatment from these tech platforms. Elisa, I'd hate to monopolize the Congresswoman's time here. Do you have any questions for Representative Ross?
Yeah, I guess sort of generally, one of the things that sort of struck me was I'm fighting this on a front as a voice actor and as a working actor on the kind of SAG-AFTRA front, but it was interesting how I didn't even think of it until I saw this on your website, that with music AI platforms, not all AI companies are yet convinced they even need licenses to make use of existing music. And I have to imagine that as somebody with your history of intellectual property law, that has to be absolutely maddening, even just on a personal level.
It's very, very frustrating because let's get back to just the basics of the Constitution. Remember, intellectual property, copyright, patent, it's in the Constitution to reward science and the useful arts. It's a foundation of this country that we lift up, celebrate, and compensate innovators and artists. And so when people think that they can just take people's creativity for free and then make their own money off of it, that not only is unfair, but it violates a basic tenet of our Constitution. And that is something that I think the public really doesn't know about. They say, oh, well, it's just one little thing. Well, no, it's the property right of the creator. And I feel firmly that if we don't incentivize creativity, then we're going to have creativity from other countries take over what American innovators do. And American innovators won't, they might do it just because they have this talent, but they won't keep pushing their craft. And there's a reason why the United States is one of the best places to innovate in the world, and that's because we protect intellectual property.
I see a bigger war, I should say, is probably not the, for lack of a better word, happening here, where when we see what's happening with working musicians and Spotify, or working musicians and AI platforms, what we're seeing is a conflict between independent creators who each don't have a lot of leverage and power going up against large tech platforms who have all the power, all the money, and have become the principal means for creative professionals to get their art out into the world. That puts them in a weaker position. And so I'm wondering, kind of looking ahead here, right? Your legislation addresses two aspects of this issue with music streaming platforms and with AI platforms. But I can think of lots of situations where creative professionals are in a weak position against tech platforms and could benefit from the ability to collectively bargain. So once this legislation hopefully reaches a successful outcome, has there been any discussion about a similar kind of Protect Working Musicians Act, but for TikTokers who are putting their music on TikTok, or live streamers putting their material on Twitch? There's a lot of stuff in the news about these creators not getting compensated very well or having to deal with difficult working conditions to make enough money to live. Could we see a similar kind of legislative landscape for these professionals as well?
Well, I've heard from songwriters and some other groups about this. Haven't really looked into the TikTokers. Now, of course, the question is, again, have you got some kind of right to your creativity? And so let's see what else might be out there. So we've talked to some other groups about this. I think we're going to start with a coalition that gets along together because, it didn't get through with Congressman Deutsch. I don't want to start adding everything on and then kind of weigh it down. I want to try to get it through with a coalition that it works for, show that it works, and then we can look at expanding it. But you raised some really, really good issues and something that I'll take back to my staff and we'll start thinking about.
Oh, no kidding. If they are amenable to it, I would love to send some resources and information to your staff to, consider those aspects of it, because I think that could be the next version of this, or if you want to take it to the next level. But I completely understand your desire to want to focus on the here and now and get something through the very difficult legislative process. We all know the Schoolhouse Rock song. It's quite a process to get the president to sign something. So what can this community do? The viewers and listeners of this program, creative professionals like Elisa, entertainment, business professionals like myself, what can we do to help support this legislation?
Well, I think you can tell your members of Congress to sign on. So there's a House bill, there's my House bill. Then there's also going to be a Senate bill. Senator Ben Ray Lujan from New Mexico is going to do a bill so they can talk to their senators about it. Given that the House isn't doing a lot of business right now, it may be that the bill goes through the Senate first. And one thing I've learned as a legislator is it doesn't matter how it gets through, just so long as it gets through. And so I would encourage your listeners to contact their members of Congress, both on the House and Senate side. Ask their members of Congress to sign on. The bills will be in the judiciary committees of the House and Senate. And so to the extent that your members of Congress are on those committees, to advocate for the bill to move forward. And that's what our country's about, petitioning the government for redress.
Well, I can tell you have lots of allies of this legislation right here. We are in your camp for sure. And this is a good constituency to fight for if you're trying to promote something, because you're talking about working musicians. They know how to promote themselves and the things that they care about. So I can just imagine all the TikToks we're going to see. And you got lots of free time, of course. But thank you very much for your perspective on this. We're excited to see how this develops, how this new landscape that we're in could perhaps make legislation like this more likely to get passed. And we hope that this is just the beginning of what could be a very important conversation for indie creators. Elisa, do you want to give the Congresswoman our final question?
Sure. So we asked this of all of our guests. So one more thing before you go. Do you have any advice for any independent creators or maybe any future members of Congress in order to move their careers forward?
Oh, well, I always give the advice from the former NC State basketball coach, Jim Valvano, who ended up taking his team to a national championship. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. Have faith in yourself and play it all the way out.
What a mic drop. Jim Valvano quotes are always welcome here. We love Jimmy V. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us this week. We really appreciate your perspective. And I know this is always a bold thing to ask given your busy schedule, but please don't be a stranger. We'd love to have you on again real soon and keep this conversation going.
That'd be great. Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
Our thanks to Congresswoman Deborah Ross, to Elisa Rockdock, to producer Lauren, and all of our viewers and listeners for checking out Break the Business. We will see you next week.